Hello, everybody. My name is Jessica. I'm an artist and illustrator. A lot of my watercolors are done these days in sketchbooks and as illustrations for my card company. And some of my cards are really tiny. And all of this kind of combined to make me fascinated lately with very small watercolor paintings. My watercolor painting is over, I'm not going to tell you how many years because it's like awful lot of them. Have been every size and for every reason and take forever. And a lot of times when you're working on a big painting, you can't get it done and it takes a long time and you don't get a feeling of accomplishment and you might give up. And so one day, while I was thinking about doing another large watercolor painting that would be brought down and printed on a smaller greeting card, I thought, what would it be like to just do the tiny painting in the first place? And that was it. I got completely enamored and addicted to tiny paintings. And there's just a lot of wonderful things to say about them. They're just fun and they're done in a really short period of time. And you don't have to store them. You don't have to frame them. You can. You can take them out and play with them like I am right here. But the major thing is that you learn to be a better painter by practice. And so when you're doing a lot of tiny little paintings, you're getting a lot of practice and you're getting a lot of playing with different with color schemes and with brushes and with different colors of watercolor paint and everything that you do in a really big painting, but you're doing it in a really small painting that is done in, less than a half an hour, sometimes 15 minutes, and you're sitting back and you go, I have a really cute thing. And it's fun. Our basics are that you need 12 pieces of watercolor paper. Now, I have 300 pound here because I had scraps around it to cut it up with, and 140 will also do. The cool thing about having a little heavier paper is that you have a substantial little guy here. It's not gonna warp with any moisture, and it's gonna maybe in the end be easy to mount, maybe in a little frame, who knows what. But anyway, the heaviest watercolor paper that you can find around you. Make sure, use a paper trimmer or something to make sure that you get nice, evenly cut 2-inch canvases. That's what we're going to call these little guys. Okay, so those are our canvases. And I did say watercolor paper, and I said it on purpose. We are going to use wet media here. And if it isn't watercolor paper, it is not going to look like what I'm doing, and you are going to be frustrated, probably. So watercolor paper, at least 140 pound, and if you can get 300 or 200, that's even better. So there's the canvases. Next, we need a pencil and an eraser, and that's to do our pre-sketching. And I love to, these are very inexpensive, but I love white erasers, first of all. And when you can stick them on the end of your pencil, that's really awesome. Then you don't have to be reaching for another thing. This is a 3H pencil. And I always recommend pre-sketching with a 3H pencil. A harder lead makes a lighter line. It doesn't smear and it erases real cleanly, and you'll see that all the way through the class as I use my 3H pencil. This happens to be by Tombow. There's a good one made that's a turquoise color. All right, we are going to need a fine liner, ink pen of some kind. And I recommend Pitt Artist Pens. I recommend Uni pen is much less expensive and it dries instantly. These are pigment inks. Uni pens come in a lot more of a selection of point sizes. Anyway, a fine liner for ink. Okay, and then a ruler, a little one. No, you don't want to be, handling some big old ruler on these little tiny pieces of paper. And I'm fishing right here to show you the other kind of ruler that I love. This one I love, very inexpensive too, because it has a cork back. So they don't move around when you put them on something. This one does move around sometimes, but I love it because it's a little grid ruler. And instead of dealing with numbers and eighths and sixteenths or meters and millimeters and blah, you are just counting squares when you're trying to get something the same up here as it is down there or whatever, or the proportion right. You're just counting little squares. These are also really inexpensive. We're talking a couple dollars here. Amazon. This is that's a Bates, but Westcott makes really good ones, and I think this is a Westcott. Yeah. So search that on Amazon, and you will have those. And then paintbrushes that I'm going to use. There's only going to be a couple of sizes, a 4 and a 2, in a pointed round brush. And they're called pointed rounds because when they're wet, they're pointed. and the round part holds a lot of paint or moisture, so that is really a good thing. This is a filbert. It's a pretty beat up filbert. And all of them around me right now are also pretty beat up because I use them so much. This is a brush with a rounded shoulder, and it's absorbent. It's also synthetic, and I use it for lifting and I use it for blending really softly because that soft shoulder does a good job of blending, better job than most other brushes. Now, color. All you need is a simple set of basic watercolors. This is Codman. It's a student grade by Winsor Newton. It's very good paint. And that's a good range of basic colors there. And that's really all you need. You can complete every masterpiece with your pencil and eraser, your ink, your brushes, and a simple set of watercolor paint. Now, anything else that you have around, you can also use. You could use watercolor pencils instead, but the effect is going to be different. And I'm going to be teaching you basically how to use pan watercolor to do these things. And so you're going to have to substitute some knowledge if you're using some other media, but that's okay too. And I will be adding whatever I can grab sometimes to get like a better effect. And I'm also using a bigger set of paint, but that's just because it's sitting on my desk. So that's the sum total of supplies. And so the whole thing is going to be very, very simple. I really like the idea of starting out a workshop with love, with a little love. And so we're going to put a heart on this little masterpiece and use a complementary color scheme, I think, when we paint it. Now, your heart can be just as wonky as you want it to be, but try to get it into the center. I'm going to show you a little guide way to make sure your heart ends up in the middle. And that is to find your midpoint on your 2-inch square, which is at 1 inch, obviously. And to just put the lightest of little guidelines down the middle. Now this way, if you want to do a symmetrical heart shape, you can start with the one side and only have to deal with that at the moment. And then it's easier to match your shape over here to the line than it is to try and watch this curve and reverse it. It's a brain thing. what your brain likes and what your brain doesn't like. And of course, there's another trick about using a piece of tracing paper. And you draw this half and then trace it on the tracing paper. Flip it over and press through the back and you get the other side here, and that would be perfect. But perfect is good sometimes, and other times it just doesn't matter. So we have our heart, and then I want to put stripes behind my heart, and I want them to kind of be even, and I want to be able to alternate the colors, so they're not going to be really small. I'm going to start with my first division just above the top of my heart. And then I'm looking at that measurement because I want them to be not perfectly alike, but kind of alike. It's about 3/8 or so. But I'm going to eyeball this, and I'm going down one side at a time with parallel lines, just trying to establish that very similar or same spacing, and this line will end up just under the bottom of my heart. And then I go back and I kind of tweak a little bit, but I like that. So I am going to finish it off on the other side. And I always turn my paper around because my hand always likes to be drawing away from me, and does a better job when I give it what it likes. Okay, I like this. Now the second step here is to ink it. And that's always hard. It never turns out quite as nice as it does in pencil. I'm looking for a little heavier of a fine liner. I'm going to use like a 0.7. And the reason is that I'm going to want my lines very defined in this one. So again, I draw away from myself always. In putting the lines in first is going to help me when I actually ink in my heart. And having it in this direction, I am able to really see that spacing and whether the lines are parallel, if they're straight up and down to my eye from this angle. I'm happy with that. This will be trickier, and I will be turning this as I go to keep my hand happy so it doesn't bobble the ink. And see, that's a nice, strong black line that we'll be able to add color and still see that really nice line. Next up is erasing, and because I use a very light pencil line, a 3H pencil, that usually cleans up very nicely. And I was using a uni pen fine liner there, and they're wonderful. They dry instantly. So do the Pitt pens. But the uni pens come in more sizes, and they also supposedly have a rounded tip, and that makes the tip last longer, and it's smoother to use. Ready for color. I have my Sennelier palette here, and a number 2 pointed round brush. This is a synthetic, and a pretty beat up filbert. So, in my experience, it is a better thing always to paint in lighter areas before red. The red seems to reactivate and flow much more easily than other colors. And you don't want to have your red heart here and then go and find that you put your green or your lighter blue in and the red goes into that area. One thing is it will make sure everything is dry, but the other thing is this is a finished version, I am going to do the blue and green before painting the red. And notice the light in here. This is not flat color. If you're using gouache or something, and yours could be, I don't recommend gouache on this one because it'll cover over your ink lines as well, and they're an important part of the design. So at any rate, I'll set that aside and I'll show you how we get that effect. Start with the green. I'm right-handed, so I turn things so that I don't have my hand in paint. So I will probably start here with the green, and then I'll be turning it around going this way with the rest of my green so that I don't get my hand in it by accident. All right, so I am using bright yellow green, and I think it's a Sennelier. Yeah, it is. So, bright yellow green. I love Sennelier watercolor. It's honey-based, and so it retains some moisture, but it's not as sticky for travel as M. Graham can be. And the colors that they have are just wonderful. So I applied my green with my pointed round, and then I'm going to come back with this filbert, and I'm dipping it in the water first. And I'm going to pick up some of that green, lift it with a damp brush, dab off the brush on my paper towel. There doesn't have to be any real shading in a drawing like this, but getting some light to shine through, kind of like stained glass, is a really pretty look. And to do that, I use both types of brushes, but if I want to pick up quite a bit, I use filbert, and you can see how beat up this is. But they have soft shoulders, and so they're really good for blending too. So, finishing the green, and I'll go ahead and do 3 sections at once. Or maybe I'll just go the whole way, just to be more quick. All right, and remember to do every other one. And get enough color on that you're going to be able to see the light from that lifting procedure. And I'm coming back with just to show you, with my pointed round, that we can lift with that as well. And if you have a little area like that and your bigger filbert isn't going to really get in there, this is a good option just to use your pointed round. On that other stripe, my filbert can do it, and it will probably pick more up. Yeah. And there we have our green stripes. Our color scheme here is based on complementary colors, but it's kind of a split complementary because red and green are complements, and the blue is a neighbor of the green. And so complementary colors in short form are located across the color wheel from each other, and they have a relationship based on that that's pretty interesting because mixed in equal parts they would make gray. but more of one and a little of the other makes the colors pop like crazy. And the green and the red will do that here. And I'm toning that down a little bit with the blue. Because if you have equal amounts and equal intensity of two complementary colors, you have clash. And you might picture at Christmas time in grade school, somebody might have shown up in a green sweater and a red skirt or vice versa. And you go, oh, wow. And in fact, a lot of things at Christmas clash because of the green and red being the theme. But anyway, we'll run into more action between complementary colors. But that's the basis of it all. So I'm now going to use a Cinereous Blue from Sennelier. And I don't have any idea what that name is about, but this is like a sky blue, cerulean blue maybe, and kind of warm. It's a little greenish. So again, I started with this stripe that I won't have my hand in anything, and my brush did not pick that much up, so I'm going to bring in the filbert here and see if it'll do a little better. I like the fact that sky blues lift really easily because you can make clouds that way, but this is where we might need some blending from this brush too, and sometimes you pick up too much, and I feel that is too much. So since it happens to you, I let it happen to me too, so that I can show you can always go back in and then be a little more light-handed with your color. Now, of course, with your lifting, of course, in large areas, this would be a problem. It's one of the things I like about tiny masterpieces is that you're pretty much not going to mess up. My blue and my green are very dry, and now I'll put the red in. And the red is not likely, as is logical, to do anything. If it bumped, it will cover it up, but it wouldn't run the blue into itself. So the color I'm using is called Bright Red. It's from the same Sennelier palette, and I have switched to a number 4 pointed round to lay in more color more quickly. Everything I do here in Santa Fe with watercolor has to be based on my really, really, really short drying time because we don't have much humidity here. In fact, when I moved here from the Bay Area a long, long time ago, I had to stop doing large watercolor paintings because there was just no way that it wouldn't be all full of dry lines, you know, those cauliflowers. All right, now I am damping off my brush, and I'm going to very softly lift from 2 parts of the heart. That you think of this heart as like a pillow. And so these little fat parts up here are sticking forward maybe. And you notice I'm blending my lift as I go here. Because if you're not soft and sweet with this, and also depending on the paper, you can pick up too much. You can have harsh differences. And I don't like harsh differences. But if your paint is wet enough, it should blend back in as it dries. And there we have our finished little masterpiece of love.